The freezing waters of the Great Lakes preserve shipwrecks in a way oceans never could. When vessels sink, they become time capsules of disaster, frozen in their final moments. Among these wrecks, several stand out for the unexplained circumstances around their sinking and final resting place. Vessels that shouldn't have sunk, somehow did. Final radio messages that make no logical sense. Wreckage patterns that contradict known physics. And underwater sites where modern divers experience phenomena they can't rationally explain. In this video, we'll explore 5 Great Lakes wrecks whose stories are disturbing not just for how they sank, but for what divers continue to experience when they explore these wreck sites. Welcome to Shipwreck History. The SS Emperor was a Great Lakes bulk freighter, built in 1910, measuring an impressive 525 feet in length. For nearly 40 years, this massive vessel transported iron to cities along the Great Lakes, becoming a familiar sight on these inland waterways. Despite her sturdy construction, the Emperor would meet her end in the treacherous waters near Isle Royale and Lake Superior. On June 4, 1947, while navigating through dense fog, the Emperor struck a dangerous underwater reef off the north shore of Isle Royale. The impact tore a massive gash in her hull, allowing water to flood in. Within minutes, the Emperor took a dramatic plunge, bow first into the depths. Only 21 crewmen aboard managed to escape as the vessel sank. The remaining 11 men were trapped inside the rapidly sinking ship, unable to reach safety as the Emperor disappeared beneath the surface. The wreck now rests in 175 feet of water, her bow embedded deep in the lake bottom. What makes the Emperor particularly disturbing to modern divers is the unusual preservation of her crew quarters. Personal belongings remain as they were left in that final moment, items still sitting exactly where they were placed more than 70 years ago. Divers who explore the Emperor consistently report unsettling experiences, unlike those at other wrecks. Many describe a persistent sensation of being watched while inside the vessel. Others report hearing mechanical sounds that shouldn't be possible in an abandoned wreck, the phantom noise of engines that ceased running decades ago. Some have even described hearing footsteps moving through the corridors of the ship, when no other divers are present. Even more disturbing are the stories from divers who have ventured into the engine room, the area where several crew members were trapped during the sinking. Multiple dive teams have independently reported seeing shadowy figures moving through this area, only to find nothing there when investigated. Technical equipment failures are unusually common near the wreck, with cameras, lights, and dive computers malfunctioning without explanation. The Emperor's final resting place remains one of Lake Superior's most compelling dive sites, not just for its historical significance, but for the unexplained phenomena that continue to make even experienced divers question what really lurks in the shadowy corridors of this underwater tomb. The SS Clifton began her career in 1892 as a wooden bulk freighter designed to carry iron and grain across the Great Lakes. At just over 300 feet long and capable of carrying 3,000 tons of cargo, she was a sturdy workhorse that operated reliably for over 3 decades. By 1924, the aging vessel was showing signs of wear but remained in regular service. On September 21, 1924, the Clifton departed Marquette, Michigan, bound for Detroit, with Captain Emmett Gallagher at the helm. Weather forecasts indicated moderate conditions with potential for deterioration, leading several captains to delay their departures. Captain Gallagher decided to proceed despite these warnings. The Clifton was last seen passing through the Straits of Mackinac and into Lake Huron, and then she disappeared. No distress calls were received. No debris was in the immediate area. No survivors were found. The Clifton literally vanished without a trace. Within days, it became clear something catastrophic had happened.
She's one of those great unsolved mysteries, that how did a vessel carrying 27 captain and 26 crew simply disappear in 1924 and never discovered?
On September 26, 1924, the first evidence of disaster appeared when painted wooden pieces from the Clifton were recovered. Days later, on October 1st, a life raft from the vessel was found. The most telling evidence came when the Clifton's hatch covers and the forward section of her pilot house were found, with the searchlight and clock still attached, approximately 70 miles from where the life raft was found. This extraordinary dispersal of wreckage indicated that Clifton hadn't simply sunk, but had suffered a catastrophic structural failure that scattered debris across a vast area of Lake Huron. Despite this evidence, the main wreckage and the fate of her crew remained a mystery for nearly a century. It wasn't until 2016 that a shipwreck hunting expedition led by Undersea Research Associates finally discovered the Clifton's main remains in northern Lake Huron. The wreck itself presents an unsettling scene, lying on her side at approximately 170 feet deep. Its significant structural damage is consistent with the violent breakup suggested by the widely scattered debris found in 1924. What made the Clifton's case truly disturbing is the evidence of an almost supernatural destruction. The vessel didn't merely sink, it was catastrophically torn apart with such extreme violence that pieces were scattered across miles of open water, as if some enormous force had reached from the depths and shattered the ship. Whatever struck the Clifton hit with such devastating suddenness that not one of the men aboard had even seconds to reach their communication equipment or deploy proper life-saving measures. The wreck became an underwater tomb, where time appears to have stopped at the exact moment of catastrophe. Most of the crew's remains were never recovered, leaving the wreck site as their final resting place, a silent monument to whatever unimaginable force could destroy a sturdy 300-foot vessel so completely that it remained hidden for over 90 years. The SS Noronic earned her title as Queen of the Great Lakes through luxurious accommodations that rivaled ocean liners of her day. Built in 1913, the 362-foot cruise ship featured elegant staterooms, grand dining halls, and ballrooms where wealthy passengers enjoyed floating vacations across the Great Lakes. For decades, she represented the pinnacle of inland waterway travel. On September 16, 1949, the Noronic docked at Pier 9 in Toronto Harbor, with 524 passengers and 171 crew members aboard for an overnight stay. Most passengers were Americans enjoying the final cruise of the season. Around 2:30 a.m., while most on board were asleep in their cabins, a small fire started in a linen closet on sea deck. Within minutes, the situation transformed from minor incident to unimaginable horror. The Noronic's elegant wooden interiors, decades of varnish, and oil-based paints created perfect conditions for fire. Flames spread with shocking speed, moving through passenger corridors faster than people could escape. The vessel's fire hoses proved useless. Most had been disconnected for the overnight docking. Most chilling were the ship's outdated safety features. Many emergency exits remained locked, watertight doors automatically closed when power failed, and the crew had never conducted proper evacuation drills with passengers. Only 12 minutes after discovery, the entire ship was engulfed in flames. While many crew members escaped, they had minimal training in emergency procedures, leaving passengers on their own to escape. By 5 a.m., the fire was fully extinguished, but officials waited another few hours for the ship to cool before the recovery efforts began. The final death toll reached 119, and identification of the victims required their dental records and personal effects, a first in Canadian disaster response. Today, the section of Toronto Harbor where the Noronic burned remains a site of reported paranormal activity. Dock workers and visitors describe hearing screams on foggy nights, particularly around the anniversary of the disaster. Some report seeing what appears to be smoke rising from the water where no fire exists. Local boat captains have reported their compasses spinning erratically when passing over the exact spot where the Noronic burned. Others claim to have experienced unexplained cold spots on otherwise warm nights in this specific area of the harbor. Visitors unfamiliar with the disaster have described feeling sudden, overwhelming sensations of panic and the urge to flee when walking along the pier where survivors once gathered. The burnout hull of the Noronic was eventually scrapped, but not before photographers captured haunting images that continue to disturb viewers today. Twisted metal frameworks surrounding cabin spaces where passengers had been trapped, personal belongings fused to the deck by extreme heat, and the ship's once grand staircase transformed into a charred skeleton. The Noronic disaster fundamentally changed maritime safety regulations across North America, but for many, the site remains more than a historical footnote. It's where the boundary between past and present seems unnaturally thin, particularly on quiet nights when fog rolls into Toronto Harbor. The SS Henry Steinbrenner was a 427-foot lake freighter that had reliably sailed the Great Lakes for over 3 decades. Built in 1901, she was considered a dependable workhorse in the U.S. Steel Fleet, hauling iron from Minnesota to steel mills in the lower lakes. Despite her age, nothing suggested the vessel was vulnerable to catastrophic failure. Throughout her career, the Steinbrenner had survived several serious incidents that might have foreshadowed her ultimate fate. In 1923, she grounded near Detroit, Michigan, and required extensive repairs. In 1937, the vessel collided with another steamer, causing significant damage. Perhaps most telling, in 1941, the Steinbrenner suffered structural damage during a November storm on Lake Superior, with reports of buckling plates and strained seams. In spite of these warning signs, the aging freighter was repaired and continued operating. By 1953, the vessel had remained in active service far longer than most ships built at the turn of the century, with many of her sister ships already retired or scrapped due to age. Despite her aging hull and history of structural issues, the Steinbrenner set out on what would become her final voyage, departing Duluth with a full cargo of iron, bound for Toledo. Weather reports indicated a developing storm on Lake Superior, but nothing that should have threatened a vessel of her size. Captain Albert Stiglin, an experienced mariner with decades on the Great Lakes, decided to proceed. A decision that would lead to one of Lake Superior's most bizarre maritime disasters. By dawn on May 11th, the Steinbrenner found herself battling 65 miles per hour wind and waves that towered over 20 feet. What happened next defied conventional understanding of how ships typically sink. In a terrifying sequence, the vessel's hatch covers, massive steel plates securing the cargo holds, began tearing away one by one, as if being systematically removed by an unseen force. Crew members reported watching in horror as each cover was ripped off in succession from bow to stern, allowing water to pour into the holds. As the Steinbrenner began taking on water, she exhibited behavior that experienced sailors found impossible to explain. According to survivors, the vessel developed an extreme list and showed erratic rolling patterns as water flooded the cargo holds. The ship's behavior became increasingly unstable as more hatch covers were lost, with the vessel listing severely before beginning her final plunge. The crew managed to launch lifeboats, but in the frigid May waters of Lake Superior, survival time was measured in minutes rather than hours. Of the 31 men aboard, only 14 survived the sinking. Several survivors reported that as they drifted away from the sinking ship, they could hear the screams of their trapped shipmates echoing across the water, sounds that some claimed continued long after the vessel had disappeared beneath the waves. When the wreck was finally located in approximately 750 feet of water, underwater cameras revealed the vessel in a state that puzzled researchers based on survivors' descriptions of the violent sinking. Personal effects remain arranged within the accessible portions of the wreck, preserved in the cold, deep waters of Lake Superior. Dive teams using remote-operated vehicles near the Steinbrenner report unusual equipment malfunctions. Cameras fail, lights flicker, and sonar produces strange readings. Some researchers have documented unexplained temperature drops near the wreck, cold spots that can't be explained by normal lake thermodynamics. The Steinbrenner's final moments remain one of Lake Superior's most disturbing maritime mysteries, a vessel that seemed to defy the laws of physics as it sank, taking 17 lives with it to the depths of the greatest of the Great Lakes. The Carl D. Bradley was one of the largest freighters on the Great Lakes when she was launched in 1927. At 638 feet long, this massive limestone carrier dominated the waterways for more than 3 decades, before meeting her catastrophic end. The Bradley primarily hauled limestone from Michigan's northern quarries to steel mills in the south, a routine but vital role in Great Lakes shipping. On November 18, 1958, the Bradley was making her final run of the shipping season, racing to beat the approaching winter weather. Captain Roland Bryan had been monitoring a developing storm but believed his massive vessel could handle the conditions. As darkness fell, the Bradley found herself battling 65-mile-per-hour wind and waves that towered over 20 feet in the middle of northern Lake Michigan. At 5:30 p.m., First Mate Elmer Fleming heard a sound no mariner ever wants to experience. A loud thud, followed by what sounded like tearing metal, that reverberated throughout the vessel. From the pilothouse, he witnessed something that defied belief. The massive Bradley was breaking in two. The vessel's back had broken at midship, and the bow and stern rose while the center sank beneath the waves. Captain Bryan desperately radioed their position and situation. "This is the Carl D. Bradley. Our position is approximately 12 miles southwest of Gull Island. We are breaking up." Within minutes, the vessel had separated completely into two sections. The stern section, with most of the crew, plunged quickly to the bottom. The bow remained afloat longer, giving a handful of crewmen time to launch a life raft. What makes the Bradley's sinking particularly haunting is what the survivors experienced. 4 men initially made it into the raft, but only the first mate and deck watchman would survive the night. As they drifted in the darkness, battered by massive waves, they reported hearing the screams of their shipmates who remained trapped in the sinking stern section, voices that gradually faded as hypothermia claimed them one by one. When the Bradley was discovered in 1995, she was found resting in 360 feet of water, broken into two main sections, lying approximately 90 feet apart. Diving expeditions revealed something disturbing. The vessel appears to have suffered from extensive hull cracks that had been temporarily repaired, rather than properly addressed. The Bradley had essentially been sailing with a fatal weakness that her owners had chosen to ignore. Perhaps most unsettling are the reports that continued for years after the sinking. Radio operators on other vessels and coastal radio stations claimed to receive phantom distress calls matching the Bradley's radio frequency and call sign. These mysterious transmissions, often received during November storms, would fade in and out, sometimes with what sounded like muffled voices beneath the static. The disaster devastated the small community of Rogers City, Michigan, where 23 of the 33 lost crewmen lived. With a population of just 3,800, the town lost fathers, sons, and brothers in a single night, a generational tragedy that forever changed the community. Some residents still report experiencing cold spots and hearing phantom distress whistles near the harbor on the anniversary of the sinking. Today, the Bradley remains reachable only by the most advanced technical divers and is a silent grave to the 33 men who were lost that November night. For the 2 survivors who drifted for 15 hours in near-freezing water, the memory of their shipmates' fading cries remains the most haunting aspect of a disaster that should never have happened. These 5 Great Lakes shipwrecks continue to fascinate and disturb us decades after their sinking. Their stories combine tragic human elements with unexplained circumstances that challenge our understanding of maritime disasters. The Great Lakes freezing, fresh water has preserved these wrecks in eerie detail, creating underwater time capsules that allow us to peer directly into their final moments. Whether you believe in the supernatural elements that some attribute to these sites, or simply appreciate the historical significance of these tragedies, these vessels remind us of the force and mystery of the Great Lakes. These waters may appear peaceful on the surface, but they guard the secrets of countless shipwrecks, each with its own story of tragedy, mystery, and the unexplained. Let us know in the comments which of these stories you found to be the creepiest. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share. It goes a long way in helping us grow our channel. Don't forget to subscribe for all things shipwrecks and hit the bell to get notified when we upload new videos. Until next time, keep exploring.